Hi there, this is Talia, the dietitian. Today I'm answering a question that's been very popular, and that is, how do I keep my child seated at the table? I've had a lot of parents telling me that their child will either stand at the table, or they will wander around and eat, or they will eat and then wander away and come back. And I can understand why that's really frustrating, and especially if you have a child that doesn't tend to eat what you think is enough, you might be thinking in your head, it's okay, let them stand, let them walk around, I'm just happy that they're eating. I do get that 100%, I get it. But we really want them to be sitting at the table for actually quite a few reasons. And in this video, I'm going to give you 4 tips that you can use to get yourself to the place where you are able to set a firm boundary and think about some of the reasons why your child might not want to be sitting at the table. So I wanted to start off by saying that the reason we want kids sitting at the table is that's the behavior that we need to be modeling for them, and it's the behavior that we really need for them to be sitting at the table. We don't want crumbs all over the house, we don't want bits of food dropping all over the place. When children are wandering around and eating, they're distracted and they're more likely to accidentally swallow something, and it could get lodged and they could choke. So it increases the risk of choking, and it increases the distracted eating. When we are sitting at the table, we are much more able to be focused on what's going on in our bodies. We're able to chew our food. We're able to listen to what's happening in our stomach, or my stomach's getting full, or I'm still really hungry, versus when we're walking around. And I'm sure you can relate, because I'm sure you've been eating, I'm sure you've eaten at some stage recently where you've been doing other things, and you're distracted. You're not able to really fully focus on what's going on. And we want our children to be able to really focus on what's going on so that they can chew their food, not choke, and so that they can know what their stomach is saying. I'm still hungry, or I'm getting full. So that's really the reasons that we want them sitting at the table. So my first tip, I have 4 tips for you. The first one is looking at or assessing whether or not they're comfortable at the table. And what I mean by that is, when we sit down, think about how you're sitting if you're watching this video right now, or how you sit at the table. Your hips are at a 90-degree angle with your legs. So your hips sit in the chair and your knees come out to here, and then your feet are on the floor. And we're all at 90-degree positions here. So make sure your child is sitting upright, and make sure that their feet have a footrest or something to rest on. Imagine if you've been at a bar or sitting at on a high stool anytime, and there isn't a footrest. You can kind of feel like you're up very high and your feet are kind of dangling. It's really hard to maintain the proper positioning, to be comfortable, to really focus on your food. And if you're really distracted by that and you're using all kinds of muscles to stay upright, that can be distracting and uncomfortable, and a reason that a child doesn't want to be at the table. So that's tip number 1. Tip number 2 is to assess, really think about, are mealtimes pleasant times? Why and why not? So what I mean by that, when your child comes to the table, what else is going on? Is it a really chaotic time? Are you running around? Are there lots of other things happening in the background? Is it a time of stress? Is it a time that you're sitting down at the table? What's happening in terms of the way you're talking to each other? Are you having a pleasant conversation? Is there yelling? Are you yelling at the child? Are you telling the child that they need to eat this, that, and the other thing? Or is it very relaxed? So thinking about those things. I've been in a situation where I've had a parent yelling at the child at the table that they need to eat this or drink milk or whatever it is. And it wasn't even me being yelled at, but it's very uncomfortable. It wasn't a nice place to be sitting at the table to hear all of that. And so imagine being the child who's being yelled at. It wouldn't be a pleasant experience. And I'm not saying that that's the case in your home by any means, but try to identify what could be deemed as unpleasant for your child, and make some adjustments and see how that changes the dynamic for them. So that's tip number 2. Tip number 3 is age appropriateness. So I know a lot of parents expect that their child can sit happily at the table for a decent amount of time, but I'd like to help you reframe that mindset. Children are very busy. You know that your child is always doing things. They view meal times as a time to eat, and that's it. They come and sit at the table, they'd like to eat, and then they'd like to get washed up and continue doing what they're doing. So think about how long does it take, once you've put your child in their high chair or their chair, how long does it take for the food to get in front of them so they can start eating? If it's more than a minute, I would recommend trying to scale that down and make it even quicker, because children don't want to be sitting there for a long time and waiting. And I know that kind of seems like, oh, I'm a servant, I have to do this, but if you want to have a successful mealtime, this is one of the things that you can do, is make sure that the food is ready when you bring them to the table. I'd also actually recommend giving them a little heads up before you tell them that it's dinner time and you bring them to the table. Imagine if you were right in the middle of putting away dishes or sending an email and your spouse came up to you and just grabbed you by the arm and said, oh, actually, we're going and doing this right now. Just stop doing what you're doing. And you'd be like, oh, but I was in the middle of something. Your child feels the same way. So giving them a 2-minute heads up of, you know, if someone was saying that to me, hey, Talia, finished that email. In 2 minutes, we're going to go in the car and do something, or it's time to have dinner. I would appreciate the 2 minutes heads up so that I can wrap up what I'm doing and get moving to the next thing. And so doing that with your child, they'll appreciate that too. And then when you bring them to the table, try to have their food ready for them so that they don't have to wait for a long time. And similarly, at the end of their meal, when they tell you they're all done, you can double check with them. Yep, are you sure you're all done? You're not hungry anymore? Okay. And then wash them up, especially for babies. And as children become toddlers and are a little bit older, they may be willing to wait at the table a little bit longer. And if you're right in the middle of eating, and let's say you have, say, a 1.5-year-old or 2-year-old, that's probably an appropriate age to start telling them, hey, I'll wash you up in just a sec. I'd like to eat a few more bites of my food and then we'll get you washed up and you can get going to what you were doing. That's not an unreasonable request, which leads me into tip number 4, and that is that a lot of parents have told me recently that they find it really rude that their child doesn't stay at the table, or they expect their child to sit and wait, even if they're finished after 10 minutes. They expect their child to sit and wait at the table for another 10 minutes or 20 minutes while everybody else finishes their meal. I'd like to help you reframe that as well. And they're not being rude. Young children don't have that same idea of, oh, it's a community thing. We come to the table, we sit and we talk about our day, and then it's polite to sit and wait. Children don't understand those concepts. They have time to learn those concepts, and they will learn them, and they'll find the table to be a much more pleasant place when they feel accepted. And when you can accept that they are done and they would like to move on, because that's how children work, let them know, I'll wash you up in just a minute. Wash them up and let them go and do their own thing. They're not being rude, they're being a child. And they do have plenty of time to learn that they can sit at the table longer, but this is one of the things that they may find unpleasant at a meal, if they have to sit there for another 20 minutes. They don't want to be there. It's not pleasant for them to sit there. Imagine if you were done doing something and somebody told you, you're not allowed to leave, you've got to stay here. Imagine if you finished your doctor's appointment and your doctor said, actually, this is a slot of 30 minutes. I know I've given you your prescription and it only took 5 minutes, but you have to wait here for another 25 minutes. You'd be like, but I'm finished. I'd like to leave. Your child feels the same way. So accept them where they are, know that they're not being rude, and it's age appropriate for them to want to move on. And that makes it pleasant for them. And it also makes it less stressful for you. You just wash them up and allow them to go and do playing on their own. And that is a perfectly fine thing to do. So I really hope those tips have helped you reframe your mindset. Drop any questions that you have below, or tell me about the successes that you've had after you've tried some of the tips. I'd love to hear about them. And if you found this video helpful or you learned something, turn your notifications on and subscribe to my channel, because I'll have new videos coming every week. And this is Talia the Dietitian. Bye. There's a lot of nutrition information out there. I am a dietitian and this is my specialty, and I'm here to help you.